Mr. Digital.
Welcome to Music 101. Music 101 is created to empower music itself and legendary icon in the music industry. And of course, another week, another episode. Great episode. So, Mr. Make, what will be our topic for today?
I'm going to call this Who Are the Groove Masters? The top bassists who define
Groove.
rock, funk, and beyond. So, if I were to
Wow.
introduce these folks, these are the masters of the rhythm, the bass players. As the bass guitar is often the unsung hero of the music world, which provides the rhythmic backbone that drives the beat and sets the tone for the rest of the band. But for these groove masters, the bass is so much more than just a supporting role. It's an instrument of expression, a tool for creativity, and a key to unlocking the very essence of the music. From the iconic thump of Paul McCartney's Come Together to the slinky funk of Flea's Give It Away, the song Give It Away, Give It Away. These legendary bassists have not only defined the sound of rock, funk, and beyond, but they've also redefined the very role of the bass itself. So, what I'd like to do is to take a journey through the careers of the top bassists who have left their mark on the music industry, exploring their unique styles, influences, and contributions to the world of music. And You Discover Music is really helpful because they help with some of the background for what I'm doing. And I have a confession to make. I haven't learned to play an instrument. I just love the music. But if I did learn to play, it would be the bass I would learn. So that's why I probably have an interest in
Awesome.
the bass as well. So, a trio of rock bassists reinforce the idea of what a bassist usually is. John Entwistle is the preeminent quiet one in the band, in this case, The who lays down the mighty rhythm, but without calling attention to himself. Likewise, Bill Wyman played with finesse and groove, but didn't take the spotlight to compete with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones. John Paul Jones barely gets any credit for the Led Zeppelin sound, but without him, it wouldn't be, well, Led Zeppelin. Once he retired, his loss was obvious, and the remaining band members lost the magic. So, in conclusion, with only four limited strings, these mighty players astound us with their creativity, funk, and drive.
So let's give them an applause for those groove masters. So, Mr. Mick, who are the jazz bassists then?
Marcus Miller, I wanted to mention, he's played with Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock, so he's got to be dynamite. And Marcus Miller surely is. Not only is he a world class film composer and multi instrumentalist, he's a trusted bass player for some of the best jazz musicians in the history of the genre. And so I'm trying to pick out one of the songs that's representative of him, and I would say it's Tutu, which is from 1986. It's a beautiful, melodic, and harmonically rich song that showcases Miller's exceptional bass playing, composition, and production skills. The song features a memorable bass line, lush harmonies, and a soaring melody that's become one of Miller's signature tunes. The song was released on Miller's album of the same name, Tutu, which is a commercial and critical success, and it's considered one of the best jazz albums of the 1980s. Tutu has been covered by many other artists as well. Also, want to mention in the same genre, Esperanza Spalding. She is arguably one of the few modern players who are doing the most to advance the art of the bass. Having recently stepped out of the purely jazz world, singer and bass player has moved into the pop R&B progressive realm of her own devising. And if I picked out a song from her, I would say listen to Black Gold, which is a great tune. And Joey Spampanato, so it's easy for everybody else to say. He's from New NRBQ. He's a longtime bassist of the cult bar band NRBQ, which stands for the New Rhythm and Blues Quartet. Joey embodied the band's right but loose mindset. Usually playing fretless bass, he had no problem putting walking jazz bass lines into their most straightforward pop tunes and rocking out during their jazz numbers. After catching Keith Richards' ears from the Rolling Stone, Joey played on his solo record, Talk is Cheap. He's a renowned American jazz bassist and singer, and although NRBQ's music is often classified as pop, rock, and roots music, they've also explored jazz and other genres throughout their career. And if you want to listen to one of his signature tunes, that would be Riding in My Car, 1977. It's a beautiful, laid back jazz tune that features Joey's smooth bass playing, soulful vocals, and catchy melody. It's a standout track from their album At Yankee Stadium, which is a great stadium if you ever get a chance to be there. I've been there. And it's recorded live at the iconic New York City Stadium. The song has a relaxed, jazzy vibe, with Joey's bass line providing a steady foundation for the rest of the band. So that song's been praised by critics and fans alike. Great tune, Riding in My Car. Percy Heath, the modern jazz quartet, and he's also played with Miles Davis. And this is the modern jazz quartet's founding bassist. He's also recorded with Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie. And when you think of the stately, elegant sound of an acoustic jazz bass, it's his work that you should refer to. And if I were looking for a best song that features his playing, that would be Fontessa, 1956, from the Modern Jazz Quartet. It's a beautiful, slow-burning ballad that features Heath's lyrical and melodic bass playing, as well as the quartet's signature blend of jazz and classical music. And this is from their album Fontessa, which is considered one of the greatest jazz albums of all time, been praised by all kinds of people, critics, and fans alike. Charlie Hayden, he's one of the most exploratory jazz bassists out there, and he expanded the sonic possibilities of double bass, beginning with Ornette Coleman's landmark album, The Shape of Jazz to Come. He also had productive stays with Keith Jarrett and Pat Metheny, playing also selectively on rock sessions, including the closing track Ramshackle on Beck's album Odelay. So if I was going to argue for one of his best songs to listen to, I would say listen to First Song from 1979 from his album Steal Away. This song is a beautiful, slow-burning ballad that features his lyrical and melodic bass playing, as well as his poignant and introspective composition. It's a standout track. Critics and fans like it, and it's a good one. Now, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the phenomenal bassist, probably of all time in jazz. That's Charles Mingus. He's an innovator in jazz and one of the most adventurous bassists in any genre. Any bass player who hasn't absorbed Goodbye Pork Pie Hat or Haitian Fight Song hasn't explored the instrument enough. And he's probably the standout bassist, maybe of all time. Also want to mention Ron Carter. He's officially the most recorded bassist in jazz, with credits in early CTI Fusion and Modern Benefits and soundtracks. But Ron Carter would still make the list of greatest bassists if he did nothing more, because he also played on Miles Davis's second great quintet, where he and Tony Williams were a rhythm section for the ages. And also to mention in more of the pop genre, First Take. This is by Roberta Flack, Compared to What? Because a lot of these players have been playing in some other fields and other genres as well. I want to mention Stanley Clarke. He's a bass virtuoso with a canny sense of riffs and grooves, plus a few great tricks with that finger strum trademark. Probably not the first bass player to record a sidelong bass solo, and this was Return to Forever's 1978 live album, but perhaps the first to perform that you would want to hear more than once. If I had to argue for one of the best songs featuring his bass playing, I would say it's School Days, 1976, from his album of the same name. The song is a funky, energetic track that features Clarke's virtuosic bass playing, as well as his catchy and memorable compositions. Standout track of all time, and it's one of the greatest jazz fusion albums of all time that features Clarke's bass playing prominently, and it's also been praised by critics and fans alike. It's considered one of the best examples of Clarke's bass playing and compositions. So, in conclusion, these jazz masters raised the bar for many other musicians in other genres as well.
So, thank you for raising the bar. Jazz basis. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Mick, who are the outstanding punk, new wave, and other masters?
Sure, this is kind of less known, maybe, but also some standout tracks there. John Myung from Dream Theater. He was a founding member of Dream Theater. He grew up playing actually violin before transitioning to bass in high school. Good choice, because this guy absolutely shreds. None other from listening his ferocious work ethic and insane practice schedule, Young ends every show by warming down, ending the night the same way he began, by playing bass. If I had to argue for the best song of his and representative, I would say The Silent Man, 1994, from Dream Theater's album Awake. Song is a catchy, upbeat track that features Myung's trap melodic and rhythmic bass playing, as well as his harmonically rich and intricate bass lines. Lots of people have liked it. So if you're looking for a representative tune from him, The Silent Man is an excellent place to start. Then there's Kim Jordan from Sonic Youth. His instantly recognizable bass sound was one of the three equal reasons why Sonic Youth was among the most innovative guitar bands of the past few decades. She was also good at grounding the improvisations or jumping right into the fray. Also, should mention along these lines Mike Watt, the Minutemen Fire Hose. He's a co founder of the Minutemen, and they made unabashed virtuosity fun again. And through his group Fire Hose and solo years, he remained one of the most adventurous musicians in the indie world, not to mention a few years later, where he was kicking things with the reunited Stooges. If I had to argue for one of the best songs featuring Mike Watt's bass playing, I would say it's Corona, 1984, from the Minutemen's album Double Nickels on the Dime. The song is a fast paced, energetic track that features Watts' driving and melodic bass playing, as well as his distinctive vocal style. I also want to mention here in this regard Bruce Thomas, The Attractions. So, this, of course, would be from Elvis Costello and The Attractions, where I had seen him actually in 1976, I believe, at Millikan High School in Long Beach, and a great, great venue, and also a pretty phenomenal bass player. So, stuff of greatness, fluid, inventive, always in three or four places at once. Too bad he couldn't get along forever with Elvis Costello. But if I had to feature something that would be great to listen to, I would say it's Pump It Up, 1978, from Elvis Costello and the Attractions, this year's model. Song is a high energy, catchy track that features his melodic and rhythmic bass playing, as well as his distinctive bass line. So listen to Pump It Up if you want to hear him. Also, would like to mention, of course, Dina Weymouth from Talking Heads and Tom Tom Club. Along with her husband and eternal rhythm partner, Chris France, Tina Weymouth was largely responsible for infusing new wave with the concept of groove as one of the founding members of Talking Heads. As one of the greatest female bassists of all time, and just bassist, period, Weymouth is part of the reason why a group of cerebral East Coast art students were able to create the definitive cover version of Al Green's Take Me to the River. So the original is great, and the way Talking Heads does it as well, too. Very well done. How about Sting? So as a precursor to his wide-ranging solo output, Sting blended funk, punk, and reggae in The Police. While he's largely moved on from playing bass during his solo career, you can always revisit the atmospheric bass line to Walking on the Moon, which remains a thing of beauty. There's Les Claypool from Primus. This would be in that kind of thrash metal alt rock genre. And he's hailing from the Geddy Lee School of thumping bass. He's cultivated a list of musical credits as widely eccentric as he is. As the frontman and bassist in Primus, he was responsible for bringing the groove to thrash metal and alt rock with his infamous rainbow bass, and forming some side projects with some others, Police drummer Stuart Copeland and Fish frontman Trey Anastasio for the supergroup Oysterhead. Also would be someone that really terrific and really like is Nick Lowe. He's a producer, he's a writer, he's a bassist. Lowe could do it all. As a producer, he handled Elvis Costello, Graham Parker, and The Damned. Not only did he know how to play fluid, often sophisticated bass lines in a hard-driving, basic rock and roll mode, but his production mastered how to make them sound awesome on record. As a bassist, he excelled in his own solo work, or with the pub rock supergroups Brinsley Schwartz, Rockpile, and Little Village. One song that arguably shows off his bass playing is So It Goes, which was released in 1976 to his B-side to his single Heart of the City. The song is a memorable bass line. It's melodic and rhythmic. It's a great example of Lowe's ability to catch and to craft a catchy and effective bass line. So it's one of his most famous and enduring songs. It's a key element to that song's success, and it's a great example of Lowe's skills as a bassist. In conclusion, the punk, new wave, and related artists had a unique contribution to make.
Definitely. So, outstanding punk and new wave. Thank you so much for your contribution to the music industry. Thank you so much. So, who are the progressive rock and San Francisco sound bases, Mr. Meg?
Sure, I put those together because they seem to be somewhat similar. So Dave Pegg from Fairport Convention, Jethro Tull in the progressive rock genre, and one song that arguably best shows off Dave Pegg's bass playing, as well as being a pretty phenomenal song, is of course Aqualung by Jethro Tull. This song, released in 1971, features an iconic bass line that is both melodic and rhythmic. It's a great example of Pegg's ability to craft a memorable and effective bass line. So that bass line is notable for its use of arpeggios, which gives a song a distinctive and memorable feel. Pegg's playing is also characterized by his use of a pick, which gives his bass a bright and punchy song. Aqualung is, of course, one of Jethro Tull's most famous songs, and it's often cited as one of the greatest songs of all time. And that bass line is really key to the success of that particular song, as well as Jethro Tull. Both of the bands Pegg played in, Fairport Convention and Jethro Tull, have a history of remarkable bassists, but Pegg stands out for his dexterity, his swing, his ability to ignore any folk rock boundaries and break some boundaries at the same time. Then there's Kasim Sultan, who played with Todd Rundgren, the Black Arts. So he jumped into the deep end by joining Todd Rundgren's prog rock band at Utopia, and that was at their most complex phase. And how old was he? He was only 20 years old. He's also been Meatloaf's musical director and been both black and blue. He's had stints in Joan Jett's Blackhearts, Hall & Oates, and the Blue Oyster Cult. He's one of the Arenas Rock's MVPs and a good singer as well. If I had to argue for one of the best songs that plays him and to his best in a progressive rock context, I would say it's A Dream Goes On Forever, 1974, from Todd Rundgren's album Todd. The song is a complex, intricate track that features his virtuosic bass playing as well as harmonically rich and melodic bass lines. Lots of people like it, so if you want to see and hear a great song by Kasim Sultan, A Dream Goes On Forever, it's an excellent place to start. Then there's Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead, the San Francisco sound. His bass playing always sounded exactly what he was, an experimental composer who learned bass for the sake of joining a rock band. Not for him to be grounding force in the jams. Lesh was far more than a catapult to parts further out, and that's part of the way the Grateful Dead has always explored things, very experimental. So his bass playing is the San Francisco sound context. Listen to Dark Star, 1968, from Grateful Dead's album Anthem of the Sun. It's a legendary epic track that features Lesh's virtuosic bass playing as well as his innovative improvisational approach to the instrument. It's a standout track. And if you want to hear him at his best, Dark Star, excellent place to start. Then here's Mike Rutherford, Genesis, from progressive rock. Perpetually overlooked in Genesis, which is often the fate of bass players, Mike Rutherford came up with one of the prog's most lyrical bass lines in That Quiet Earth from their Wind and Wuthering album. He's no slouch in the poppier tracks either, and trying a beautiful and extremely difficult fretless part in No Reply at All. But if you want to hear him at his best, listen to In That Quiet Earth. Then there's Jack Cassidy from the Jefferson Airplane, the San Francisco sound. Cassidy's 4-decade conversation with Jorma Kaukonen in Jefferson Airplane and Hot Tuna has never been less than eloquent, and his one appearance with Jimi Hendrix on Voodoo Child answers the question, what if Hendrix had played with a bassist who was better than just all right? So listen to Voodoo Chili with Jack Cassidy, and it's also from the Allman Brothers, Chuck Leavell. Then there's John Wetton, who is from King Crimson, Roxy Music, and Asia. Probably one of the most versatile bass players in all of prog rock. John Wetton could do the blazing virtuosity of Lark's Tongues era King Crimson, as well as the song-oriented approach of Asia. But he earns immortality for doing both at once with Roxy Music, especially on the live album Viva. So incredibly talented musician. While opinions might vary, I'd say one of his most iconic and widely acclaimed songs is Battle Lines from his 1980 solo album, Battle Lines. It's a masterpiece of progressive rock And his song's theme of social commentary, personal struggle, and introspection are woven throughout the lyrics, which adds depth and emotional resonance to the music. Battle Lines, great tune to listen to. Chris Squire from Yes, and Yes had full of melodic imagination, but the main instrumental track that you could listen to, something like Roundabout, but check out his wah wah extravaganza on the deep track on the Silent Wings of Freedom. But if you want to hear one song, and this is a tune that I didn't make up the name for, but it's the fish Chandeliera Prematoroso Torresa from the, yes, the 71 album Fragile. Yes, it was the 70s, folks. It's a masterpiece of progressive rock, and for simplicity, just call it The Fish, but it's a great tune to listen to. So, in conclusion, these were artists that stretched the possibility of the bass, especially from the progressive rock realm.
Yes, yes, yes. So we did finish the jazz basses, punk, new wave, progressive rock, and San Francisco sound basses. So how about we should be mentioned for rock and roll and blues?
Sure. There's a few that we could point out here. So Jerry Scheff. So you could call him the man who played with Elvis Presley and Jim Morrison when they both went to Vegas. He's the mainstay of the TCB band that's taking care of business, which was Elvis's famous motto, and the studio bassist on LA Woman for the Doors. But he's also been a session player extraordinaire, having appeared on records with Dylan, Costello, the Monkees, and many others. But if you want to hear a good representative song of his, listen to the Doors, LA Woman, because that's actually Jerry Scheff, not somebody from the Doors. Then there's Bill Black. You got to mention him early on, really the innovators of rock and roll. So Elvis's original trio, which didn't include drums during the Sun record stage, Bill Black brought the essential cool of the slapback bass into 50s rock and roll. See the bass intro to My Baby Left Me is an irrefutable proof. Later, he became one of the finest rock bassists to lead a combo under his own name. Then we should mention Willie Dixon from the blues. So Willie Dixon is so renowned as a songwriter that his importance as one of the best bass players of all time often gets overlooked. But he was the key to Chess Records' electric blues sound, playing many of the Muddy Waters classics that he wrote, not to mention, of course, some of the most seminal Chuck Berry tracks as well. So if you want to hear a great song from him, listen to, of course, The Seventh Son by Willie Dixon, and you hear his innovative blues bass playing. In conclusion, these bassists were the foundation of so much music that was to follow from blues and rock and roll.
Yes, indeed. Rock and roll and blues. Thank you so much. So, who we do honor among soul, Motown, and funk rhythm makers, Mr. Mike?
Sure, there's so many to mention. So Bob Babbitt should be mentioned. James Jamerson's less celebrated Motown successor deserves a well-deserved inclusion here. He began recording much earlier, but Bob Babbitt really excelled during Motown's psychedelic era, where he brought some Hendrix consciousness into the later Temptation records. He was picked up to play along Hendrix, although posthumously on the studio-created Crash Landing. So one of the best tracks to appreciate his vision came on Ball of Confusion. That's What the World Is Today by the Temptations. A great tune. So here is also one of those difficult names to pronounce, but got to mention her, Michelle Endigiocello. An early 90s work set that soul revival in motion and established Michelle as one of the mavericks that could build something original and modern out of the soul tradition, incorporating pop, rap, and reggae into the mix. She also happened to play with the Stones in her spare time, so very prolific as well. So listen to The Way by her. Then there's Victor Wooten, Bella Flack and the Flecktones. While he's a solo artist, he took Stanley Clark's style of fusion bass and upped the ante with more sounds, more flash, and more daring style, often described as the second coming of Jaco Pastorius, who I'd like to mention as well. The Grammy-winning bass player is rightly beloved by the jam band crowd and beyond. So if you want to listen to an iconic song by him, listen to Zona Mona from the Flecktones' 1991 album, Flight of the Cosmic Hippo. Great song from him. Then, of course, there's Louis Johnson from the Brothers Johnson. Louis Thunder Thumbs Johnson's affinity for smoother R&B with jazz overtones made him Quincy Jones's bassist of choice, and his pioneering slap bass landed him on Michael Jackson's Off the Wall and Thriller albums. He also scored a number of 70s hits with his brothers George as part of the Brothers Johnson. So, song along those lines, which is a great tune, Get the Funk Out of My Face. Great song. Then there's David Hood. This is not my history professor from college, a person of the same name, but this is David Hook of the Swampers. Having toured in Traffic, most recently with the Waterboys, David Hood was the mainstay behind the fabled Muscle Shoals rhythm section, the Swampers. A master of that slinky, laid-back funk and one of the most open-minded musicians around. His signature groove can be heard on everything from the Staple Singers' I'll Take You There to Clarence Carter's Snatching It Back. But of course, you have to mention, because this ties in, a favorite of yours, Mr. Daniel, Aretha Franklin, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. And that, of course, is David Hood on bass. So listen to that, and you'll hear a great track. There's Bernard Odom. He's played bass with James Brown, and probably that, nothing else would get him a place on the greatest bassist. But he was the bassist on two of funk's most seminal texts, and that is Papa's Got a Brand New Bag and Cold Sweat by James Brown, earning him the title of one of the most influential bassists of all times. Then there's Aston Family Man Barrett from Bob Marley and the Wailers. He's one of the first key players who joined Bob Marley and the Wailers. It's still a group. He's laid the groundwork for all reggae to come. And a history of the groove would be far poor without a representative sound of his, and that's Trenchtown Rock. You can hear that live on at the Lyceum from London, 1975. Although outstanding bassist, mentioned, of course, Bootsy Collins. So he got actually kicked out of James Brown's band for being far too trippy. And he went on to be a key bass player in the P-Funk universe for pretty much the same reason. Well, he's one of the greatest bassists of funk. He made Superbad one of Brown's defining hits. So if you want to hear him at his best, Superbad, Part 1 from James Brown. Great tune, too, and of course, featuring the bass player Donald Duck Dunn from Booker T and the MGs, found at Stax. He might be the least flashy player on this list of all great bassists of all time, but he's a big guy. You can barely see Duck's fingers move on the strings, even when he's playing with rockers like Neil Young or Eric Clapton. But listen to Green Onions, which is a fantastic hit from the 1962 album of the same name. Green Onions. There's George Porter Jr. from the Meters, and he's a founding bassist, was one of the most prolific of his circle, leading to countless spin-off bands, but a landmark groove, you can hear him, is on Sissy Strut, and that was one of the greatest of the New Orleans players. There's Larry Graham, Sly and the Family Stone. I remember them so well. On television and other places, he also was a key Prince collaborator, leading to one of the fine band Graham Central Station in the interim. But no bass line defines funk better than the perfectly nasty one on Sly's Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again. So you can hear Larry Graham on that track. Then, of course, there is the funkiest of the Funk Brothers, James Jamerson of Motown. And he put all kinds of credit on Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. And for Jamerson could be also heard on You Can't Hurry Love. All kinds of great funk, soul, reggae artists. So in conclusion, these are some of the bassists that are most prolific and influential in music.
Prolific in the music industry. So again, we talk about the jazz basses, outstanding punk, new wave, progressive rock, as well as San Francisco sound basses, rock and roll and blues, and Motown funk rhythm makers. So how about the hard rock basses to mention, Mr. Mac?
Sure, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. So in many ways, he's Mr. Iron Maiden. He's the only constant member since their inception in 1975, and the only one of two who's appeared on all their albums. So he'd be somebody to mention. Of course, if you want to hear one of his most iconic and enduring songs, it's The Number of the Beast from the 1982 album of the same name. So if you want to hear them, very good. Of course, we have to mention in hard rock, Geezer Butler, some Black Sabbath. He's one of the great riff meisters in rock, the main writer of a lot of Black Sabbath music, and a creator of the heavy metal bass template, Play only what's absolutely necessary to play, but play it like there's no tomorrow. While others quietly supported the groove, Butler turned the bass into a blunt instrument. So if you want to hear one of his most iconic and enduring songs, where could you go but listen to Iron Man from the 1971 album Paranoid? I used to listen to that on my 8-track. Then, of course, speaking of 8-tracks, also the same thing, Mel Shacker of the Grand Funk Railroad. So he's arguably the best musician in the band, slamming that gonzoid style of Detroit hard rock for the masses. And Graham's Funk was always slammed by critics, but the fans loved it. So it was loud, throwing the bass up front like few before him. So when Mark, Don, and Mel from Grand Funk were just a trio, the band had to fill large arenas with sound, and he did it and did it well. There's Cliff Burton from Metallica, same template of Black Sabbath geezer Butler, but a speed metal bassist. He found it absolutely necessary to play a whole lot more. So from Metallica, listen to him. Then there's Lemmy from Motorhead. What a interesting character he was. One of the greatest bassists in hard rock, played the bass with more attitude than anybody else. And if you want to hear a great song from him, listen to Ace of Spades. So with these folks from hard rock, in conclusion, they had their significant contribution to make.
Totally significant, and they have their own legacy in the music industry. So, Mr. Mick, how about the rock basses?
So, somewhat related, of course, to the hard rock is a rock bassist. So, Billy Sheehan from Steve Vai, David Lee Roth. So, he's effortlessly blend impeccable technique with an innate feel for groove. He's celebrated for use of chording, two-handed tapping, right hand, three-finger picking technique, and controlled feedback. So, if you want to hear or listen to a great song from him and his example, Addicted to That Rush is a great example from their 1989 album, Lean Into It. Then there's Chuck Rainey, an off-recorded master of all kinds of 70s Los Angeles players. He was a cool jazz musician who could play rock if it was sophisticated enough. And Rainey, not surprisingly, found out with all kinds of people who wanted sophisticated music. Quincy Jones, Niall Lofgren, Dave Mason, and the Soul Sessions, Roberta Flack, Aretha Franklin, and largely was the reason that Steely Dan's Walter Becker moved over to guitar. Phenomenal player from both his session work with others, but listen to Steely Dan's Kid Charlemagne if you would like to hear Chuck Rainey, a great example from him. Then I mentioned earlier at the outset, Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He's well known for his extraordinary bass playing, but his his one-of-a-kind blend of funk slapping and melodic bass lines made him a generational talent. His essential work with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but he's also collaborated with Atoms for Peace, Pigface, Rocket Juice, and That Moon, Mars Volta, I don't make these names up, Johnny Cash, Tom Waits, Alanis Morissette, and Young MC. And oh yeah, he also played trumpet for Nirvana. There's a talented guy. So in conclusion, these are artists from the solid basis of so much rock that we are familiar with, and these are the innovators.
Innovator in the music industry. Thank you so much, rock basses. So, how about who are the classic rock basses, Mr. Mick?
Sure. Got to mention in this regard, of course, Carol Kay. If you listen to 1960s pop, you have listened to Carol Kay. She put the bottom end into what was called the Wrecking Crew in Los Angeles. She played the indelible parts of bass on Midnight Confessions, River Deep, Mountain High, The Beach Boys, Good Vibrations, and an estimated 10,000 other tracks. Female bassists stopped being pigeonholed as a novelty the minute she picked up the instruments. A key player in what was called the Wrecking Crew, played on all kinds of songs for all kinds of artists. But if you want to hear a representative of her, you could know no better tune than Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys, because that's Carol on bass. And speaking of bassists, we got to mention, of course, who, but from the Fab Four, Paul McCartney. He made a trademark out of that supple lyrical bass line, probably more than any other rock player before or since. And if you want to hear how good Paul McCartney is and how innovative he is, listen to Paperback Writer. It's one of the best bass players in history. He both played lead and rhythm, and he did it all ridiculously well. Trademark of everything the Beatles did. And oh, yes, by the way, he wrote some good songs as well too. What a phenomenal and talented artist he is. Should mention Gail Ann Dorsey. She is a luminary from the city of brotherly love, a city that I love. That's Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She actually moved to London to play jazz, but included stints with the Gang of Four, Tears for Fears. She recorded an eclectic solo album that employed Eric Clapton as a sideman. With that, she was qualified to become the longest continuously serving bassist in any musician for that matter, because she worked with David Bowie for years and years. So great representative bass of hers. Listen to Under Pressure live from the Reality Tour in 1995. Speaking of the classics, of course, Bill Wyman from the Rolling Stones. He's one of the quietest and the most reserved ones, but he was very quiet and yet absolutely essential. So if you hear a great bass line, listen to Shattered by the Rolling Stones and also the 19th Nervous Breakdown. If you listen to that, you're going to hear and appreciate his work. Of course, I mentioned him earlier too, John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. He was the riff master in Led Zeppelin. So you hear a lot of great songs, Black Dog, Misty Mountain Hop, and probably really where he's featured most is on the Rain Songs. That's a classic rock tune featuring John Paul Jones. You can actually hear him. Then there's Geddy Lee from Rush, and he evinces just how much he could rock with a power trio. And if you want to hear a good song for Geddy Lee, La Via Strangiato. And of course, along these lines too, classic albums, Jack Bruce from the Cream. Rock superstars got together, and he would also get credit for playing with Eric Clapton and push Clapton to develop In White Room. So great Cream classic. Listen to that. You can hear him. There's John Entwistle. So if nothing else, listen to My Generation. It's one of those defining songs of the entire generation, and it's featuring, of course, John Entwistle. So I'm going to end off here with somebody, and there's also a personal side of this, a phenomenal bass player. He left us way too soon, had some personal demons that he dealt with, but Jaco Pastorius, he's probably every minute of the short time he expanded his technical and dramatic possibilities of the bass. I also played with Joni Mitchell, Pat Metheny, and of course, my personal connection, Ian Hunter. Yes, despite his overlooked status, Pastorius regularly introduced himself as the greatest electric bass player in the world, and I'm not going to argue. So if you want to hear him teamed up with Ian Hunter, listen to him on All American Alien Boy. It also seems like it may be an introduction to rap of all things, but listen to that great tune. It's Jaco on bass. He was groundbreaking playing style was what he known for. He's known for with jazz, rock, and funk. Worked with Weather Report, Pat Metheny, solo projects, and of course his unlikely companionship with Ian Hunter, but also a terrific song. And if you want to know more about Ian Hunter, of course, you can read my book, On Track, Ian Hunter. It's available on Amazon. So great, great rock players. And also to conclude, a great introduction to that genre from basses.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Classic Rock Bases, for giving flavor in the music industry. So, how can we conclude the discussion of the Bass Masters, Mr. Meg?
Sure. As we conclude our journey through the world of legendary bassists, it's clear that their impact extends far beyond the notes they play. They not only shape the sound of their respective genres, but they've also inspired a new generation of musicians to pick up the instrument and make it their own. The bass player has become a symbol of creativity, rebellion, and self expression. And the masters of the craft have shown us that it's not just about playing the right notes, but about feeling the music deep in your soul. Whether you're a seasoned musician or just a music lover, the legacy of these legendary bassists is a reminder that music is a powerful force that can bring people together, inspire us to be our best selves, and also leave a lasting impact on the musical world.
Again, thank you so much for your legacy. And groove masters, as Mr. Mick saying, is a term often used to describe musicians, producer, or bands who have mastered the art of rhythm, groove, and musical flow. These artists excel in creating infectious beats, seamless melodies like Under Pressure. Until now, I have that melody in my head,
In your
and
head.
dynamic arrangement that captive audience and keep them moving. Mr. Mick, another great episode, and for sure next week we have a again better topic that we're gonna talk about. So, would you like to plug in something, Mr. Mick?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Daniel. So you can also listen to me on the Doctor of Digital and also pick up those volumes, Burning America, and also on track Ian Hunter, available on Amazon. If you're interested in books and writing, you can catch me on the Idea to Author Coach on Facebook, and would like to chat with anybody who's interested in books, because as Mr. Daniel always says, more books, more
More
books.
books. More books, people. And I want to plug in our baby podcast, Mental Health 101. And this podcast is created our mental health awareness. So please do listen, Mental Health 101. Mr. Mick, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Day is full.
Marty Come, people. See you soon.